very much. And thank you everyone for such a warm welcome. It's so nice to see so many friendly faces of people that you don't actually know, but who are the reason that I've spoken out, because your families are just as important as mine. It's that simple. So my story really as an undertaker, I've been an undertaker. First of all, let me introduce myself. So my name's John O'Looney. I'm not a great name, but one to remember. I've been an undertaker for around 15 years now. 10 of those were spent working for one of the big funeral providers, Co-op Funeral Care. The first 5 years was really good, and then the bank collapsed and they brought the money men in, and it was all about squeezing you guys for as much money as they possibly could. I wasn't happy working like that, so I left and set up on my own 5 years ago, and I've been working for myself now for 5 years. In November of 2019, I had a family that came to see me who'd lost a loved one in the neighbouring borough of Northampton. I'm based in Milton Keynes, and they said to me that they were a bit upset because the hospital wouldn't let them see their loved one. Okay, so I said, fine, no problem. I'll go and get your loved one quickly, and you can spend time with them at a funeral home, you know, because it's all about treating people the way you would want to be treated, isn't it? You know, where people are just mirrors. So much like a mirror, if you look into that mirror, what do you get? Exactly what you give, you know. So that's the kind of template that we work on. So I picked this deceased up, and I couldn't help but ask the mortuary staff while I was in Northampton General, you know, why wouldn't you let this family see their loved one? And they opened the viewing room door, and there's, for those of you who are not aware, who've been fortunate enough to not be aware, there's a viewing room always attached to a mortuary, so that people can go in and see a loved one, and they pass away on the ward, they bring them down, and you can kind of see them at rest, you know. But they opened the door, and lo and behold, it had this big kind of inflatable tent thing in it. Can I put my coffee down? Thanks, buddy. And they said that's why. And they didn't mention the word COVID, but they kind of said that there was something nasty coming, you know. So anyway, I collected this deceased and went through my normal process, and lo and behold, about a month later, and just as the new year turned, COVID appeared, and we were shown pictures of people falling over in the streets in China, and you know, these draconian measures were all built in, and we were all standing on doorsteps clapping for the NHS, weren't we? And we were told 15 days to save the NHS. 15 days. That was 2 years ago. And look at the state of things now. You know, so I'd hasten to add that as a funeral director, I very much believed the narrative early on. Now, the way I could put it is, if you go to a hospital and someone says to you, the mortuary staff say to you, this deceased has got tuberculosis or HIV, you collect that person in a sealed body bag, and trust me, you won't open it if you've got, you know, you're going to be exposed to something that's really dangerous. So this was kind of no exception, but I kind of felt that for someone that's lost their loved one over a Zoom call, or standing there in a hazmat suit, that's not really acceptable. So I washed and dressed them all. Now, there were a number of things that happened over the kind of 10, 12, 16 weeks, and the police officers that are here will know this. They'll know this, because they're the ones attending the scene of all these sudden deaths that are taking place in jab recipients, you know. So I had a family come and see me who'd lost a little girl to cancer. She was only 6. Now, they wanted to spend time with their little girl. She had a brother of 5 and a sister of 7. You know, how can I tell them, no, you can't, you know, because, and this is at a time when all the other funeral directors were taking coffins down to the hospital and picking people up straight in the coffin and sealed. And if you were lucky, you'd get the clothes laid on top. You know, that's not taking care of people. That's not treating people with the same respect you want for your family, is it? Do you know, so I washed and dressed and embalmed this little girl and gave them the time, and I kind of thought, do you know what, if I can do that for them, I can do it for everyone. And that's what I've done the whole way through. It's a miracle I'm alive, surely, you know. So I took a phone call in March from a guy who also identified himself as John, and he said that he worked for a resilience company who contracted by the government to call all local funeral directors. So his job was to ring round to every funeral director, and he was going to call me every Monday, he told me, and I was happy to help. You know, why would you not want to help? There's this terrible pandemic. People are falling over in the streets in China. So he would ask me several questions. He would ask me what my capacity was as a funeral director to be able to take deceased-wise, you know, numbers. He would ask me who I'd picked up. He would ask me how many and where from and how many were COVID. So I would, happily furnish him with those details. Why would you not want to help? But almost immediately, he was steering me, and by that the conversation would go much like I would say to him, okay, I picked a guy up from a care home, and by this time the doctors have stopped attending to protect the NHS, there were no police attending, and the officers here will confirm that if you ask them, I'm sure. There were no doctors, no COVID tests, no police, but every one of them was COVID. Now, I spoke to the family, for example, this gentleman, and he'd been in the care home for 5 years. He'd had onset dementia. There was no COVID test, no doctor, no police officer present, but they insisted they had to put him down as a COVID death. And I would kind of say, well, why is that then? Because we both know he wasn't. Oh, we knew there was a case in there, so we've been instructed to report everyone as a COVID death. And that went on throughout 2020. And what I saw as a funeral director, there was no increase at all in the death rate. In the death rate in 2020, there was no increase at all, not a single one. In fact, it was very slightly busier in 2019 than 2020. But what we did see was every death they could possibly do was relabeled as a COVID death. So what you've then got is a pandemic death rate. This is the first time in 15 years I've not seen a single winter flu death, not one. Where did winter flu go? It's gone, it evaporated. So exactly that. So I also took a call from the BBC very early on, and they wanted to come and interview me. And again, this was very early on. I was happy to help, and they came and they sat down and they asked me to dress up in full PPE and put a mask on. And a mask is not something you usually wear as an undertaker. Now, I worked for the coroner for 7 years, and my job was body recovery. So that was hangings, RTAs, road traffic accident, shootings, anything you can imagine, really. So we would sometimes wear a mask. I mean, you can imagine if you turn up to a house in August and there are Christmas cards up, you need a mask, because we would put Vicks inside that mask. It doesn't protect you against anything. It just takes away some of the smell when you're recovering that deceased, So, and what I found was during the course of 2020, it gradually unfolded that it was just total bullshit. There was no substance to it at all. The death rate wasn't up. I was waking up every morning expecting to fall over, and I got to kind of November, December, and I thought, I wonder if the death rate is suddenly going to soar in January when they start putting needles in arms. And locally, where we are in Milton Keynes, they started, they well advertised they were going to give everyone these life-saving jabs on January the 6th, yeah? So we had Christmas, it was quiet. I had one person I had to look after Christmas Day. And I went round to see him that night and took him a Christmas dinner because he'd lost his missus, bless him. And he was on his jack, he was on his own, So that was quite upsetting. But I went back to work the first week of January, and they started putting needles in arms, and almost immediately the death rate went through the roof. I've never seen nothing like it. And to give you an idea, it was probably 300% what I'd expect it to normally be. And there were all the people that were jabbed. It was all the most vulnerable that were protected. And they hadn't been protected at all. They'd been euthanized. That's what had happened. They would. Was going down to the hospital, and I was seeing nurses crying, and the mortuary staff were ringing me up, begging me to come and pick deceased up. And that was immediately at the point that needles went into arms. And I can tell you, any funeral director with an ounce of integrity will look at their mortuary register and tell you the exact same thing. And that's what happened. And that went on for about 12 weeks. And then it went deathly quiet. There was kind of like no death rate at all. And I think maybe that's the way of nature balancing itself out, isn't it? Where if they kind of euthanized all the ones that were most feeble, they got round to the ones that were slightly fitter, and they obviously weren't passing away. So what we've seen now, to give you an idea, I've obviously been very public about what I've felt, because I just feel that your family is as important as mine. Why would I know what I know and not say anything? You have to ask yourself, what have I got to gain? What have I got to gain? I've got nothing to gain. I've got everything to lose. So I to give you an idea, I received an email from someone who purported to be from RT Media. And I'll tell you what her name was, Yvonne Myers, because I never forget the email, because it's not often you get offered £85,000 And what they wanted was an exclusive. So they asked me to speak to them, to give me their story, and then what they would do is they would present it to all the different networks. They'd be told no, it would go in the bottom drawer, and I was contracted, I couldn't speak to anyone else. You know, and I kind of said, look, you know, you're not grasping the concept. This is not about money. It's not about money, it's about people's lives. It's about people's lives. I've lost it again. Help me. How's that? Oh, that's bad. Sorry, I'm not very technical. So, where was I? So that's what I've basically found is that there was no increased death rate in 2020. They made massive efforts to relabel every death as a COVID death, and the only time people died in great numbers was the moment needles went in arms, and that's the reality of it. You know, so what can you take away from that? You can either listen to what I've said, or you can take government advice and go and get a jab. It's that simple. But to give you an idea, in the last 2 weeks, I picked up 2 kids in their 20s that have died not long after having a jab. You know, and it's not the only two. And I'm a very small family-run funeral director, so you can imagine what the big players are going through. Do you know? And I speak to guys that are still working for the co-op that have got the coroner's contract, and they run off their feet because people are presenting at the hospital short of breath. And I even spoke to one girl who worked for the 101 service, and she said that 9 out of 10 people that are calling up are jab recipients and they're short of breath because they're full of blood clots. Do you know? So you know, you can either take what I've said and listen to it, or you can go on your way and go and take the jabs. And I know I respect anyone's decision, but to know what I know and not say anything, it would make me complicit, and I refuse to be complicit. So last September, I took a phone call from a guy called Mark Sexton. You'd have probably all heard from him, of him. And I was asked to go to Westminster to a meeting that was attended by 2 government ministers. One of them didn't turn up and cited personal reasons. The second one was a very prominent guy called Sir Graham Brady. Now, for those of you who are not aware, Sir Graham is... he's the commissioner of something called the 1922 Committee. He's a very senior guy. And we met at number 1 Birdcage Walk on September 21st. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a 2 o'clock meeting. And I actually was escorted down there by a member of the SAS, believe it or not. He was a really good guy. So anyway, I went in there, we had the meeting. There was about 18 of us there. And to give you an idea of who was present, Professor Dolores Cahill. Now, this is a woman who was advising government in her 20s, do you know, in her 20s, and she must be, I would imagine, approaching 60. Please forgive me, Dolores, if I've got that wrong. But she's at the very top of the game, and now the Guardian and the Times reported it as a group of anti-vaxxers. This is a woman who worked for the government building a career on vaccines. So do you know, Suparit Bhakdi was there, Mike Yeadon, the Vice President of Pfizer, Dr. Sam White was there, Philip Hyland, Anna Debisseray, I hope I pronounced her name right, and just many others, Diana Hyland, Mossop. There were loads of people there. There was a lot of people there. It was quite intimidating because I'm just an undertaker. They all had letters after their names, and I haven't. You know, But we all had 10 minutes to give testimony in our respective fields, and mine, obviously, in the capacity as a funeral director. And it was utterly damning. I can tell you now. I saw evidence go down on the table to Sir Graham that suggested 70% of the children vaccinated would be sterilised. And that was an accepted side effect. Sterilised. And he acknowledged that. He said there was nothing he could do, he was powerless, and he couldn't stop it. Now, it was put to him towards the end of the meeting that when the masses find out what's been done, there'd be a level of civil unrest. And he said the government are well prepared. And look at all the new huge super prisons that are springing up. Do you know, now I'm 54, I've been I've listened to prison overcrowding for decades, and every now and again you'll get a new Home Office minister in who promises to address it and never does. So now we're on our knees economically, and that's a priority to build super prisons. Come on, what don't you see? You know, there are things there that are so obvious. For example, ask yourself a question, why do 80,000 NHS staff prepared to lose their careers rather than take the protection. The government said they'd sack them all, didn't they? They haven't. Why is that? Because they know they'd have 80,000 prime witnesses all spilling their guts. So that's the first one. Number two, 10 weeks ago, COVID was going to kill you all. You couldn't work, you couldn't travel, you certainly couldn't see your own family. Move fast forward 12 weeks, you can move a family in from the Ukraine. What can't people see? How can they not see it? Is it me? Am I just wired differently? Or do you know? And then you have to look at all the FIFA registered footballers and trainers that have died in the last 18 months. Another one at the weekend, a lad of, I think he was 39. I read it this morning, you know. Super fit guys that are scrutinised, every ligament, every tendon, but all of a sudden now they've got sudden heart conditions that were on, you know. What can't people see? Do you know, I've got no tin foil out. I'm an undertaker. This is what I see. And I've had 70 or 80 reach out to me privately and say the same thing. I've even had them tap me on the shoulder at the crematorium and say, thanks for reaching out. You know, thanks for speaking out. And I'll say, well, that's great. What about you speaking out? And they go, oh, well, you know, I'll get this sack. And, do you know? So I don't mind getting wet, bruv. There's nothing special about me. If these lot can get wet, I can get wet. And so I know what I see, and it was very interesting sitting with Sir Graham. Now, my business is people, you know. I look at people and I suss them out in a few exchanges, and then I'm probably different things to different people. That's the art of being a good undertaker, is bonding with that family. And I can tell you, I looked at Sir Graham. He fucking knew. He knew. He was like a guy with a kid with his hand caught in a biscuit tin. He couldn't get out of that meeting quick enough, I tell you. He knew what was going on. These people know, and they look at you as livestock. And I tell you why I think, on reflection, there's a number of reasons they're targeting Europe and the US. One is the pension pot. There's nothing in there. And a little indicator for that was a couple of years ago when they moved all the ages for women, didn't they? You couldn't get your pension for a couple more years because there's nothing left. They've done it all. And I spoke to a number of economists that have reached out to me and confirmed that. You know, it's easier to kill you off than it is to try and pay you a pension they ain't got. You know? I also think, when you think about Europe and the US, apparently we use 80% of the resources but represent 20% of the population. So there's another reason to target us and to thin us out. I know what's happening. You know, people can deny it, but there's a growing number of doctors who are gradually stepping out. I watched an ICU doctor this morning cried his heart out, saying what he thought. I put it on Facebook. I was banned within like 30 seconds, so another 30-day ban. You know, but I don't care. They can do whatever they want, because I tell you, the future, the way they're going, the future is really grim. And now it's monkeypox. Like, you're all fucking idiots, like you're all monkeys, aren't you? You know, how can they be so stupid? How can they be so stupid? And it was very interesting because they've made a few mistakes on the way. One of the biggest ones was the political knives out for Boris, and they released that Partygate. You know, we've all been told about Partygate, haven't we? Now, think about it logically. They're so busy trying to stick the knife in Boris to put another monster in, that what they didn't realise is that actually they were all there, they were all partying. So while they were locking you down and ruining your businesses and telling you couldn't see your families, they were all having a whale of a time. Do you know why? Because they knew there was no pandemic. They knew. They knew. So I'm going to close by just telling you a little bit about, just before Christmas, I was warned that if I keep speaking out, I'd get targeted. And lo and behold, despite handling deadly infectious cases for 2 years, I suddenly fell ill just before Christmas. And I was short of breath, I couldn't breathe, you know, and I got admitted to hospital. It was very interesting because the ambulance crew turned up and there was a female paramedic, and straight away she went in on the attack. I can't believe how selfish you are. You know, this is why I'm fighting for breath. So it felt like I'd been poisoned. I didn't feel like I was ill, you know. So went into hospital, laid there. They took 3 or 4 lateral flow tests, and I was the only one in there, despite the fact they're being swamped. And all 4 tests, or 3 or 4 tests they did, they were all negative. So I never had COVID. She said, it's not COVID. I was like, well, what is it then, you know? said, oh, I don't know, but we'll put you up on the ward. So they put me up on the ward. The following morning, this was early hours of the morning, so the following morning, the consultant came round and he said, right, he said, he sat on the bed and he was maybe mid-50s, quite suave. You know, one of them guys you look at and you think, you're good-looking bastard. He was a real good-looking guy. And he said to me, we're going to start you on some remdesivir. And I said, no, you're not. And he said, well, why? And I said, well, let's Google remdesivir and see the side effects. Breathing difficulty, blood pressure, liver, kidney function. And lo and behold, what are all these people dying from who are being treated for COVID? Liver and kidney function. You know? How can people not see it? Now, let me tell you an interesting story. Fauci was using remdesivir to treat Ebola patients in Africa a number of years ago, right? And he was targeting all kids that were 7 days old and over 3.5 kilograms in weight using remdesivir. Do you know what the mortality rate was of that? 53%. 53% of these kids that he gave remdesivir died. And do you know what they died from? Kidney and liver failure. So I asked him, I said, you know, what basis do you give? Oh, well, I'm only doing what I'm told. And he stomped off. And I never saw that consultant again. So later in the day, I would say about dinner time, I had a young girl sit on the end. I say young, she was probably late 30s, as young to me. And she sat on the bed and she said, hi, I'm whoever she was, from Oxford University, all right? So, Oxford University, that's Australia. I said, what are you here for then? She said, we're here to save your life. And I said, oh, okay then. She said, we want to treat you for your COVID. I said, but I've had 3 or 4 negative COVID tests, so clearly I'm not COVID, because they're making palliative care decisions on the basis of these tests. So I've tested negative. So why would you want to treat me for COVID? Oh yeah, we're going to save you, we're being told we're going to save you. We're offering you something called tocilizumab and another one called baricitinib. And I know baricitinib is used to treat chronic arthritis, apparently. So I said, okay, I said, give me the spelling, and I had my phone, and I said, let's Google what the side effects are. Breathing difficulty, kidney function, liver function. Why would you want to give that to a respiratory patient? And she, oh, I'm only doing what I'm told. Another one scuttled off. Couldn't justify why she was doing it. But and I tell you, on reflection, what they wanted. They see me, they want to portray me as a prominent anti-vaxxer. I'm not, I'm just an undertaker who's seen loads of people die after having an injection. Kids in their 20s and 30s, people that shouldn't be dying, you know. It's as simple as that, you know. What they wanted was the death of a prominent anti-vaxxer from COVID. That's what they wanted. And it was funny because they know what I've been saying, and I never hear from the BBC. And lo and behold, after my hospital release, I get the phone call from the BBC at the funeral home, Free Counties Radio. So I kind of said, oh, hi, how can I? Oh, we want to know all about your COVID experience. So I said, okay. I said, I don't think you do. And he said, why? And we had a chat for about 15, 20 minutes, and I told him exactly what had happened, you know. And he said, well, what about, he said, and he said, give me a minute, and he went off the phone. And then he came back. He was obviously getting advice from his flunky. And he said, what about if we come in and record an interview with you? And I said, yeah, that's fine. I said, and to keep it well balanced, what I'll do is I'll film that interview. Oh, the silence is deafening. I never heard from him again. But listen, I'm going to shut up now and hand you over. I just want to thank everyone for coming. And do you know, I've come all the way up from Milton Keynes today. Do you know why? Just to fucking save one of you. Just to save one of you.